Commission. We held our first meeting earlier in March where we looked at health. This is our second meeting addressing education, addressing the demands identified in the Race Equality Report, which was produced by the Commission in January 2022. All of the recommendations and demands were accepted by the Council in February 2022. A brief background on the Citizen Tribunal for those not familiar with our work. The Citizens Tribunal is made up of 10 members. Each of us bring our own individual skills and expertise, in particular our lived experience that reflects the priorities areas of the report. This evening, we'll be specifically addressing the demands around the inequalities in education. You will soon hear from the Ealing Education colleagues in the Ealing Learning Partnership, the ELP, about the work that they are doing to address the demands identified in the Race Equality Report around education. You will also hear from the Citizen Tribunal Education Subgroup about their role in scrutinising and reviewing the ELP's responses. Members of the public viewing at home, this is your opportunity to ask questions or to comment on what you have heard. By using the chat function, officers will put as many of your questions to our panel to provide their responses. Before we get into the meeting, I'd like to ask our panel members, please to introduce yourselves and to say a little bit about your role. If I go over.
Hello, I'm Rosalind Glaude. I'm chair of the education subgroup. My entire career has been in education. I've been a secondary school teacher, a head of department, a lecturer at college, and a university lecturer.
Hello, my name is Rosita Caspers. I'm a member of the education subgroup. I've been involved in equalities issues in education during all of my working life, especially in race equality. On one hand, I'm depressed that we still seem as a society not to have made sufficient progress in raising the educational attainment of Black pupils. On the other hand, I am pleased that Ealing Council has grasped the nettle and has shown its commitment to the important issue and set up the Citizens Tribunal following the Race Equality Commission.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Ajayi, and I am also a member of the Citizens Tribunal Education Subgroup. For my day job, I am heavily involved in race equality. I've also worked in the education field for over 20 years at a strategic level, being chair of governors of a primary school and vice chair of a high school in Ealing. Now, as a parent of 5 children within this borough who's gone to and experienced 5 different schools, it's really important for me to have that consistency of education and to enable our Black boys in particular to be able to flourish just like all other children. I also sit as a chair of the London Diocesan Board for Schools, which is a family of over 155 church schools in the Diocese of London. And I also lead the racial justice priority for the Diocese of London, which includes over 400 churches. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Munir Basi, and I'm a member of a Race Equality Citizen Tribunal. And my background is in engineering, technology, and data-driven innovation. So I'm also a school governor. I think it is important to engage the parents and citizens in decision-making process so that they can help their children in learning journey. So in this regard, today's event is very important to listen the concerns, issues, and challenges faced by the parents and citizens. So we will listen to them and we will put these as part of our scrutiny action plans. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shama Kediri. I'm the lead programs at Golden Opportunity Skills and Development, and I'm part of the Race Equality Citizens Tribunal. I'm quite interested in education because most of the work in the borough for the last 15, 16 years has been at grassroots level. And we always trying to fill gaps in terms of different kind of inequalities. It could be children with special needs, it could be kids who are getting excluded from school. And I think the council is actually taking the right steps at the moment. And what I've found from the process so far is that we can get a lot of information, but also that there's a lot of gaps, and we still, for example, one of the projects we have is around schools exclusions, and we see a lot of kids from kind of Black communities that are still being excluded from school. So I think this process is really important, and I think it's a journey that we all take it together. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Monica McCarthy, and I'm the head teacher at St. Vincent's Catholic Primary School, and I've been very much involved in ELP and the Race Equality Project.
Good evening. My name's Julie Lewis. I'm the Director for Learning Standards and School Partnerships in the borough, and I've been leading the Ealing Learning Partnership, a partnership between Ealing Council and 85 schools to promote excellence and well-being for all children in Ealing, striving to achieve our ambition that no learner is left behind and no school is left behind.
Hi, my name is Sarah Thompson. I'm the Vulnerable Groups and School Partnerships lead within the Ealing Learning Partnership, and I lead on the Race Equality Programme for ELP.
Hello, I'm the founder. My name is Crystal Ruby. I'm the founder of a youth organisation called Young People Aspire Higher, and I'm also a high school science specialist of 19 years. I draw on my lived experience of the British education system, my interest and passion for Black history, and my passion to see all young people succeed and achieve to their full potential. I've been working with schools across Ealing to help them to adapt their curriculum to include more of the Black contributions that we so crucially need in our curriculum.
Hi, I'm Jamie Malloy. I'm the head teacher of Grange Primary School in South Ealing. I've been working in Ealing for about 9 years now, and joined the No Learner Left Behind project about 2 years ago.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Kamaljit Nagpal, and I'm the Cabinet Member for A Fairer Start, which focuses on ensuring that children and young people in our borough have the best start in life. An important part of that is access to high quality teaching and resources, ensuring every child, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to thrive in our borough.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Jasper Kaur Anand, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Tackling Inequalities and Crime. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. I'm very committed to the Race Equality Plan, and we're really looking forward to today's meeting to see if we are meeting our targets in reducing the inequalities within our borough, especially with our children. And I'd be really delighted to take the feedback and work on that so that we can really deliver on the Race Equality Plan that we have committed to deliver on within the borough.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carol Sam. I'm the Assistant Director for Equalities and Engagement, and our team provides the secretariat to the tribunal and also the interface between colleagues and partners with tribunal members. Thank you.
Before we start the meeting, I'd like to invite Councillor Kamaljit Nagpal, Cabinet Member for A Fairer Start, to say a few words, please.
Thank you very much. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank the tribunal members for their commitment to ensuring that we meet the demands of our residents. The Citizens Tribunal has been successful in giving a voice to residents, and this is part of our drive to be a more open, transparent, and inclusive council. In 2021, we published the findings of the Race Equality Commission, and since then, we have been moving forward with action on the demands that were made. In its findings, the report concluded that our children are not underachieving, they are being underserved. And we have made a commitment to tackle this inequality in Ealing, and we will ensure that in Ealing, no child is left behind. Since the publishing of this report, We've made many progressions towards this priority, which you will see this evening in the presentation that has been prepared by the Ealing Learning Partnership. We would not have been able to achieve this without your input. The Citizens Tribunal has been etched into the Council's constitution, and we hope that our residents will continue to support us to make Ealing a fairer and more equitable borough. It's our duty to be transparent and to be accountable. The Citizens Tribunal is the opportunity to do so. We need an education system that is responsive to local needs, and in order to provide a tailored service for our residents, we need you to continue providing us with your expertise and your lived experiences. And as the Cabinet Member for a Fairer Start, my aim is to ensure that every child in Ealing receives a fair start in life, which starts with our education. The Race Equality Commission made 7 demands of the education sector and its partners in Ealing that would address the areas in which it found that we could do better. And this evening, we're going to hear about how our education leaders have worked with schools, the communities, and people with lived experience to respond to those demands. I'm pleased to hear about some of the work that my colleagues in education and the Ealing Learning Partnership are working on in areas of the curriculum, race equality training, engaging parents, and developing toolkits to tackle the inequalities identified in the Commission's findings. I have no doubt that tonight will show that we still have a long way to go, and that we should not be complacent or too eager for self-congratulatory pronouncements. However, it will show that we should build on the hard work and commitment and exemplary practice being delivered by partnerships that are growing and the schools that are leading by example. We should not take our eye off our ambition. We won't. To drive change and success if we are truly serious about no learner or child being left behind. And as much as it is wonderful to be told what a great job we're all doing, it is vital that we continue this culture of challenge to drive higher standards for all of Ealing's children. It is my driving mission as the Cabinet Member for a Fairer Start that all of our children and young people, whoever they are, wherever they come from, have the opportunities that they deserve. With the critical friend we have in the Race Equality Commission pointing out how we can do better, it would be even more difficult to deliver this. So I want to give a final thank you to the Race Equality Commission and all of you that are attending tonight. I look forward to hearing about the things we need to continue to improve and the ways we can work together to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nagpal. Okay, so now we're going to move on, and I'm going to introduce Roslyn, the Chair of the Education Subgroup, to take us through some of the actions.
Yes, so I'm Rosalind Lord. I'll repeat again, yes, Education Subgroup Chair. And these are my colleagues, all sitting beside of me. And in this section, I'm going to cover 4 points. First, I'll start by explaining why, as a subgroup, we believe that there will be a difference made from this report. We're going to explain what we believe to be the key difference with the Race Equality Commission's report. My second point, I'll move on to giving you an overview of the work that we're doing. In the third point, I'll refer to the 7 demands that have already been mentioned, and I'll outline where we've observed good work to be happening. And then in my final point, I'll outline those areas where we feel there still is quite a lot of progress that needs to be made. So if I go with my first point, what we believe to be the key difference in the with the Race Equality Commission's report. We're all aware that there have been lots of reports in the past, both locally and nationally, that have studied race inequality, and we know that those recommendations have been largely ignored. So we realise that there'll be lots of you listening tonight who are thinking, what sort of change is going to be made to my child's learning experience in individual schools and classrooms in Ealing? And we know that certain parents, we've definitely heard from parents that they believe that some schools will be approaching these 7 demands in a tick box way. So what I'd like to assure you is that we, as the education subgroup, we really believe there will be a difference this time, because starting with the actual word demands, rather than refer to these as recommendations, the fact that the report calls these demands, it's signalling a determination that this time ineffective action won't be accepted. And that's where we see our role as the education subgroup on the Citizens Tribunal. We're here to hold Ealing to account and the Ealing Learning Partnership. We're an independent body. Our remit is to check that Ealing and the Ealing Learning Partnership are delivering these 7 demands in an effective way, within clear deadlines, and to produce results that are measurable. And we can assure you we're going to be looking at this definitely not in a tick box approach. So if I move on to my second point, I'll now explain to you a brief overview of the work that we've been doing to gather evidence so that we can assess whether sufficient progress is being made. So we met for the first time as this education subgroup back in October. And in the 9 months that have gone by since then, we've gone through a whole load of evidence gathering. We've attended the training that's on offer to Ealing's teachers. This breaks down into 2 sorts of training. We've got the 2 main types are race equality training and curriculum training. We see that these 2 are interconnected. And what we believe is that teachers really have to attend both types if they're going to meet the true spirit of the demands. Because if we want to see changes happening in the classroom, changes in attitudes have to happen first. So with the training that's on offer, the first type of training is the one that helps teachers to understand what the nature of race inequality is. Once they understand that, they can recognize what's happening with schemes of work, what's happening with classroom practices, and how this is underserving our Black and brown pupils. The training also then helps teachers to create different learning environments where all pupils can benefit, Black, brown, and white pupils, where the curriculum provides a more complete and accurate representation of the diverse contributions in all the subject areas. As well as this training, we've also been on leadership seminars, we've been to subject network meetings, and we've been to parent forums. We've also had visits to schools, and these have been really important so that we can see what the impact of all of this training has been, and that we can also see from schools what the challenges are and hear about their, as well as hearing about their successes. So we've visited 2 primary schools and 2 secondary schools where we've spoken to the head teachers, spoken to subject teachers, and also spoken to race equality leads. And alongside these meetings and visits, we've also, as a subgroup, met throughout the year on 8 occasions where we go through our findings and we decide what our next steps are going to be. And our work with Ealing, so working with both Julie and Sarah, we've had numerous email communications. We've had 2 meetings in person with them. And what we can report is that they have always responded to all the requests for information and data that we've asked for. They've given this really promptly. They've addressed any concerns that we've had, and they've made the changes that we've asked for. So, for example, with the race equality toolkit that they've produced, they made changes where we pointed out there were some issues with it. So what we can say is that we acknowledge that Ealing is in this first phase of their plan, and there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, but we're encouraged by the initial steps. So if I move on to my third point, and here I'm just going to make reference to the demands themselves. I'm going to highlight the first two so that you can see their connection to the others. And then I'm going to explain what we've observed to be good work in this area. So if we look at the first one, rapidly close the gap in attainment for Black Caribbean pupils. This is from the report's finding that there's this attainment gap that exists when we compare groupings of Black Caribbean pupils with groupings of pupils by other ethnicities and class. And the picture in Ealing, as elsewhere in the country, is that this gap actually widens while pupils go through the school process. So what we're saying is that they enter the school in the early years. By the time they get to Key Stage 1, the gap has widened, and it's widened further by the time they get to Key Stage 2. So there's a large gap there at the end of primary school. It doesn't close during their 5 years of secondary schooling, and then it's reflected in the GCSE results. So what we want to emphasize, just as been mentioned earlier, it's not the Black Caribbean pupils who are underachieving. They are being underserved by policies and processes that are happening in the education system. So we've been aware of these attainment gaps for a long time, but they're still there. So on the second demand and the disproportionate rate of exclusions, again, this produces dreadful outcomes for pupils of Black Caribbean heritage. In Ealing, they make up 3.8% of the pupil population, 3.8%, and yet 17.9% of permanent exclusions. So we can see these dreadful outcomes for students of Black Caribbean heritage. And the remainder of the demands address these first two. So we've got the data there, and the remainder provide the foundations, really, the foundations so that the first two can be tackled. These are the foundations that need to be in place so that the gap can be closed and that these disproportionate exclusions ended. So the types of things from demand 3 all the way through to demand 7 are big initiatives. They're things like demand 3, changing the curriculum, and demand 4, making sure that all teachers attend race equality training, because without those, in years to come, we're still going to be talking about the attainment gap and the exclusion rates. So still in this point, if I move on to what we've observed that's been working well in regards to these demands. So if I start with demand 3, what I can report first of all is that demand 3 changes to the curriculum. The courses offered by Ealing in this area are excellent. So these courses on decolonizing the curriculum, which are run by Crystal Ruby, they are huge in scope. They provide detailed guidance, support, and resources to all subject teachers. And when I say all subject teachers, it's in all areas, not just in history. And from our visits to school, we've been able to see really promising signs of how decolonizing the curriculum impacts on what the children in the different subject areas experience. So we've heard examples from art, from English, history, geography. At A level, we've heard teachers' examples from psychology, from sociology, and they've all talked about the impact on their pupils and how their pupils have benefited. And I'm sure you're going to hear some examples from panel members during the course of this evening. And another area that we can talk about where we've observed something working well is demand for the race equality training. We've been able to see the impact of this on teachers' behaviours in the classroom. So again, we could give you the example of a history teacher who attended, a secondary school history teacher who attended race equality training. She then reflected on what she was delivering in the classroom, and she saw that it wasn't sufficient to just do add-ons, quick fixes here and there. In her own words, she realized that some of the messages her curriculum had been giving to her students had been traumatic. So it had been inaccurate for a whole bunch of students because it's an incomplete curriculum, but also traumatic for her Black students. So what she did was she rewrote the entire scheme of work. So just from those two examples relating to demands 3 and 4, if we could see that all schools were engaging with the race equality agenda in this way, we'd be able to report that yes, in this first phase, there is good progress being made. However, this isn't the case. We can't report that there's been good progress being made in relation to all the demands. We do recognise, we do feel that Ealing is listening to us, that they are responding to our scrutiny, but there are still areas that require a lot of urgent work. So if I move to my final point, if I now outlined what are these areas that need more attention, there are 5 of them that we'll give you tonight. The first one relates to the training. So the good training that I've just explained there, the curriculum training and the race equality training. Attendance at these events is really low. Now, yes, we're only in the first phase, but we would expect every school in the borough to be engaging with race equality training and curriculum training. And also with this training, what we'd like to see is that the content of all, so if schools are engaging with it, it can either be through Ealing or they can commission their own providers. But what we'd like to see is that the content of all race equality training is scrutinised. The other thing that was the first one. The second point is about measuring impact. So we'd like to see how we want the outcomes measured accurately. So we want the outcomes of attendance at these training courses and implementation of these initiatives. We need evidence accurately collected so that the impact of doing these things can be measured accurately. So for example, with the Ealing Schools survey, we can't see from that which schools are attending which types of training. So we really need a more accurate picture. The third point where we feel more work needs to be done is with head teachers. So we acknowledge that the good practice that we've seen has been in schools where the head teachers were already on board with the race equality agenda, or they had a race equality lead that was really driving through change. Now, in other schools, if the head teacher isn't able to see the link between race equality and their other priorities, we know that race is always going to be sidelined. So we really need every head of every school to be on board. The fourth one, and I'd say this is the most urgent one, we need Ealing to establish effective mechanisms for sharing good practice. There's lots of really good work going on, and speaking to teachers at events that we've attended, they don't seem to know what one another are doing. There are subject network meetings, but they're not necessarily discussing the race agenda there and sharing good practice. Also, just be useful for successes and challenges to be shared more widely so that people don't see it as an onerous task, that yes, there will be challenges, but they can see that there are ways that this information could just be shared. The final one seems to be a challenge for most schools, and that is empowering parents. And this refers to demand 5. So for people listening tonight, if you're a parent or a carer, this is really where you come in, because by understanding how your school is engaging with the race equality agenda, you will be able to also, like the Citizens Tribunal, you will also be able to hold your school to account. You know that this body exists. Ealing has said they're going to meet all these demands, so you can hold your school to account to do this. So if we just move to the final part, I'm just going to explain the how the rest of the evening is going to run. So we can see that we've organized it into 3 sections: curriculum progress and inclusion, how schools develop anti-racist practices, and how parents can be involved. And it's the last section, how parents can be involved, where we're devoting all of this to discussing demand 5, so that really you should get the information that you need so that you feel you can make a real difference, a practical role to shaping change in your school. So out of these 3 areas, what's going to happen is Ealing's going to present on each one for 10 minutes. And then immediately after that, there'll be a 15-minute question and answer session. Then we move on to the second one, and that's followed by another 15-minute question and answer session. So anything that you feel needs further explanation, any thing that we haven't explained in enough detail, do post your questions in. On your screens, you'll see it's not the chat function, it's actually the Q&A function. So we're happy to answer any question, but I'll remind you, it can only be on about the topic that's being discussed tonight. And please don't post in large copied and pasted amounts of text, because we won't be able to read through them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind, for explaining the role of the education subgroup so well, and for that level of detail. I'd like now to introduce to you Julie Lewis, who is Director of Learning Standards and Schools Partnerships, who is going to give us an update on curriculum progress and inclusion. Now, in that, we're going to hear how demands 1, 2, and 3 are being met. And these are how Ealing Learning Partnership are rapidly closing the gap in attainment for Black Caribbean pupils, how they intend to, or what they're doing to end the disproportionate rate of exclusions, and how they intend to accelerate progress on changes to the curriculum. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much. In June 2022, 70 schools and 142 leaders and partners attended our education launch event. And at that event, our schools pledged their commitment to meet the race equality demands. And it was a very powerful event in the lives of those head teachers and governors. As Rosalind indicates, if you could just move it on to the, thank you. As Rosalind indicates, the Race Equality Commission shone a very bright light on the stark difference between the educational prospects of our Black Caribbean and our white Black Caribbean young people as they progress through their education journey. And what we see is a legacy of lower academic outcomes, of disproportionate exclusions, and of lower rates of progression to higher education. And the picture is particularly stark in Ealing because Ealing schools do so well for so many learners, indeed reaching first place in the whole country for the amount of academic progress made by children from the end of primary years to the end of their GCSEs. And in 2022, scoring a record number of young people reaching that academic standard of level 5+ in English and maths. What this diagram shows, as Rosalind points out, and the blue block are our Black Caribbean learners, and the orange block are our white and Black Caribbean learners. On the left, we have the percentage of young people or children reaching the expected standard at early years, moving across to the right, the expected standard or the 5+ standard at GCSE. And what you see very clearly is the difference between the blue and the orange blocks and the yellow block, which is all Ealing young people. And the difference in outcomes at the end of GCSE in 2022 was a 27% point gap. And indeed, at the end of Key Stage 2 in the primary years, a 23% point gap between our Black Caribbean learners and all Ealing learners. So this demand must drive all other activity. Move on to the next slide, that'd be great. So over the course of the last 12 months, we have secured significant engagement from schools and from governors in our race equality ambitions. We've launched a wide-ranging programme focused on all aspects of school life, developing the racial literacy of school staff, developing and profiling the schools with the most aspirational curriculum models, promoting the importance of parental engagement and recognising we've got a lot of work to do there. We've also provided schools with very high quality tools and guidance to support where they can start and the milestones they need to achieve to embark on this journey so that it makes a difference. And we've also developed new post-16 support and mentoring pathways to those young people whose ambition it is to go to university. We have seen 2/3 of our schools actively engaged with all aspects of our race equality programme over the last 12 months. We've seen nearly half of our schools directly commission their own race equality training. And we've got a significant number of Black Heritage sixth form students participating in our Insight to Uni mentoring programme. We can move on to the next slide to turn to the second demand, which is to end the disproportionate rate of exclusions. And Rosalind has pointed out the stark difference over the last 5 years in the proportion of young people from Black heritage backgrounds, not just Black Caribbean, but also Somali backgrounds, who are excluded at a higher rate than all other young people in Ealing, and indeed 4 times that rate. Again, if we look at the blue bar in relation to the yellow bar, we see the disproportionality quite starkly. If we move on to the kind of work we're doing on the next slide, we are strengthening all of our systems to scrutinise and challenge suspensions and exclusions. We're seeking direct input from our parent community leaders, from our new parent representative forum, to help us understand and what some of the barriers are between communication between schools and some of our families, and how we can strengthen those. We're also reviewing the impact of the behaviour systems and sanctions in our schools and launching a borough-wide model called therapeutic thinking, which will help schools to understand better how students' unmet needs can be met earlier. We haven't yet seen a dramatic change in the last 12 months, But I was pleased to note that our exclusions team had avoided 13 permanent exclusions this year, and half of those were from Black heritage families. So to finish, and before I hand over to Crystal, looking at the curriculum, and 79% of schools have made significant progress in reviewing their curriculum to make it more inclusive and meaningful and representative of the communities that they serve. And we will continue to work on using our curriculum networks and all of the structures of the Ealing Learning Partnership to constantly challenge each other's curriculum and how it's meaningful to those children. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Crystal.
Thank you. So for a while, Black students have been underserved by an unbalanced message of oppression and disempowerment across curriculum areas, which perpetuates stereotypes. The aspirational approach, which I have been working with schools to embed into their curriculum, inspires respect between all ethnic groups, allows schools to demonstrate and develop an ethos of race equality, and is a crucial part of an anti-racist approach. It also nurtures the expertise required in our teachers to develop a curriculum which actively debunks harmful racial stereotypes associated with students of African descent. This is done in a few ways. Addressing the knowledge and awareness gap regarding African civilizations and significant achievements of African descendants previously omitted. It's also done by revealing the usual deficit approach to Black history and contributions within our curriculums and across the British education system generally. We're also providing a framework to develop a standardized common understanding within schools so that every teacher can be culturally competent to understand how appropriately to address any contributions of Black communities, but also to do it in a way that's sensitive. And it also gives schools the flexibility, guidance, and support to make adaptations which are aspirational as opposed to tokenistic or deficit in their nature.
Hi there. So I'm Jamie Malloy, I'm head teacher at Grange Primary. I'm just going to show you a snapshot just in a couple of minutes of some of the ways that we've been adapting our curriculum in response to the training that we've received. So next slide, please. Yeah. So we took part 2 years ago in the training of the No Learner Left Behind project, which included the training from Crystal and the training from Orleen. So those dual strands that Rosalind was talking about the race equality training and also the training in the curriculum being key to everything we did. We then rewrote our curriculum aims. You can see them on the screen there. Highlighted in bold is the most important one relevant to today, that teaching will reflect our world, our cultures. We have over 50 different languages spoken in our school. We're very diverse, so we were keen not just to reflect Black cultures, but also to reflect Japanese cultures, and Arab cultures, all sorts of things in our curriculum. We'll give you some examples of that in a moment. Yeah, next slide, please. So one of the things we do at Grange is we have theme weeks. And in the past, these are at the start of each term. So three a year, sometimes 6 a year. And what we do in the theme weeks, what we used to do was have one on reptiles, one related to science, one related to, events in the media or something like that. And actually, we've had a big focus on decolonizing and diversifying in those theme weeks. The example on the screen there is about Africa's great civilizations. So that was learning about ancient African civilizations and learning that, in fact, it was Africans who first developed universities, currency, democracy. So it's debunking that deficit model, just like Crystal said, and actually the idea that all African nations are poor or something like that, and these stereotypes that you sometimes get. So we're debunking those across our curriculum. So next slide just shows some of the work that was created by the children. So we had artwork, we had history and geography work, we had English work created across that theme week. And there's just some very quick examples there. So on these next 4 slides, I think it is, are the changes that we've been developing to our curriculum. So in our English, we studied the poems of John Agard. And year 5 write biographies, and they use Serge Betson, who was a member of the French rugby team, Ealing resident, known to one of our teachers. He comes in and talks about his life, and then the children fundraise for a charity that he has, which is an education charity working in Africa. So it also across our curriculum, we have examples here. So Pablo Fank is or was a Victorian zookeeper, a bit like Greatest Showman, but just to show that it wasn't just, you know, old white men in history, that we've got a range of different people in our history topics. We studied Claudia Jones, who developed or helped develop the first Notting Hill Carnival in response to racism that she encountered in Notting Hill. So we learn about her in year 2 as famous people in our local area. And here is just what's same and different between Rosa Parks and Claudia Jones. So we've got examples of, you know, famous people through history, and hopefully not in a tokenistic way, in a relevant way to what we're studying in the curriculum. So you can see an example there that it's not just Black contributions. Look at Noor Khan, who was a World War II soldier and spy, and Ibn Battuta, who was far more famous than did far more exploring than Marco Polo, but is not as famous as Marco Polo, because this is this perpetuating, you know, racism that we're facing. It's if you're white or European, you're far more likely to be in the old history that we all learned at school, and we're kind of fighting against that by changing the narrative. Matthew Henson, another explorer there, you know, Matthew Henson, African American explorer, rather than the white explorers that we may have learned about in the past. We're talking earlier about how it's not just in history and geography. So in art, we make sure we study African American artists across all the primary years, and it's relevant to our curriculum and the teaching of art techniques, rather than something that's just put in for a tokenistic week or so. And there's some more examples of work there looking at Emperor Akbar and Mansa Musa across our curriculums in our different theme weeks. And I believe my last slide is just about Windrush Day that we very recently did. So the children across the whole school, we had our most recent theme week was about migration, the positives of migration, with a specific look into Windrush and the Windrush scandal and the racism that was faced by the Windrush generation that came over to help our country after World War II. So we did lots of artwork, lots of history work. Where is the Caribbean? What's the climate like there? You know, as well as how must it have felt to move countries. We've got lots of migrants in our school. They shared their personal journeys. We did some poems. We also learned calypso songs, had a big assembly, invited parents in to see that. And the year 5s performed a calypso that they'd learned at the playground at the end of the day, so everyone could get involved and see that we were actively celebrating the day. So trying to get that message out to parents that we're making big changes in the curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions and information. We're now going to move on to the next session, which is going to be the Q&A. Have you got any questions for us, please?
So we've got quite a lot of questions. Unfortunately, some wasn't coming through on my computer, so I'm going to be using a combination. So there's quite a lot. So I'll take a couple at a time. I'll raise a couple at a time and then we can answer it. I'm just conscious of time. So this is a very long one. It's from Alexandra. The number of people in my secondary school, Dormers Wells, using vapes have increased massively. I have seen too many people unable to learn. Seen too many people unable to learn because of addiction. However, unlike cigarettes, there is no scheme where people using vapes can be helped, this is a very long one, in their efforts to quit. Since there is no scheme and the school cannot help students struggling with vape addiction and excludes them instead, why has the council not introduced a scheme to keep students in classroom? Let's take that. Shall we move on to another one? And yeah. What is being done to let parents know about the Race Commission? What has been done to let parents know about the Race Commission? I think that's Julie's question, I think.
Thank you. We were talking with our parent carer forum about how we can better communicate the work that we're doing for parents, and our communication will be through schools. So we will we feel as though that's a really valid question, and we will work on a direct communication to parents that we can channel through schools, so that it's more visible. And thank you for raising that.
I could just add as well. I think with the parent representative forum that we're working with, we're hoping that through our partners that they will be letting the parents that they work with know about the work that we're doing. We've also been encouraging schools to communicate what they're doing with parents. We're aware that sometimes it's sort of internal, it's training, for example. They might not necessarily think about letting parents know that they're on this journey and that they're taking part in these. So we've been talking to schools about that, but it is definitely a priority for next year. And you'll see when we come on to the parent empowerment part that is something we need to get better at.
Okay, this is a question from Laurie Ogaro. Rosalind said 4 schools have visited while Julie talked securing significant engagement from schools. There seems to be a mismatch between what the ELP is seeing and what the tribunal is seeing. Can you explain this, please?
Yeah, I'll be happy to take that one. Obviously, we're just in the first phase of our work. And as I said, we're an independent body. We've got jobs outside of this. We're not free during the week to give up our work completely to be everywhere visiting every single school. We met for the first time in October, and during that time we have done a lot of work. The 4 schools that we visited just happened to be, we were only able to visit 4 during a time that coincided with when the schools were free to invite us in, and when we were also free from our own jobs to be able to visit at that time. So yes, we would definitely like to be able to visit more schools, but that's all we've managed in this first year.
Thank you. This question from Anonymous. Please, can you let me know in what ways parents have been involved in this process, e.g. in the curriculum, or is the approach that is being taken a top-down approach? What parents been informed of what is going to be done?
I think that sort of picks up on the previous question. I don't know if, because we have got a whole section around the parent empowerment and we are talking about that, maybe we could come back to that one. Is that okay?
Yeah, I agree with when we get to the third part, the third question and answer, that's, I think, where maybe most of your questions about parents empowerment would have been answered, hopefully.
And this question is from Faray. Forgive me if I pronounced the name incorrectly. So how do teachers in a class of, say, 30 students know what type Black heritage a Black pupil is to enable them to be competent to deal with individual students? To that end, is it correct that Black students tend to do much better than their teachers' projected grades? If this is true, is there a systemic low expectation of Black pupils' performance?
Yeah, I'll jump in and answer that one quickly, if you don't mind. So I think teachers are very good at understanding and knowing their children. So I think we collect data on children's ethnicity, and it will be something that teachers are well aware of in the class. You know, whether a child is free school meals, you know, the ethnic background of a child, whether they're from a single parent family, all sorts of those things are known by teachers. So I think teachers would be well aware of a subject that might be sensitive for someone in their class. But then you were saying about projected grades and a systemic level, you know, underachievement and under expectations for Black children. And I would say, in my experience, that is something that is true, and that's been part of the problem. And we need to, you know, work against that. Is it appropriate if I ask a question while I've got everyone here as an anti-racist trying to make a bit of a change? we're talking about how this is Ealing's ambition, and it's the race equality work has got these demands in. As Ealing head teachers are employees of Ealing Council indirectly, is there any mechanism to make the engagement 100% for Ealing schools? Is that within anyone's power? Because I know ELP and Julie have been working very hard to bring people on side and have those conversations and make things happen. But there'll always be a minority that don't want to involve, either because of competing pressures or they just don't think it's a problem. Maybe they're not been educated enough in race equality to realize it's a problem. So I'm just wondering whether that's any in anyone's power to explore that.
Thank you, Jamie, for presenting that. We absolutely think that this should be part of all head teacher recruitment panels. We believe that if you want to be a leader or head teacher in an Ealing school, that this has to be absolutely at the centre of your consciousness and your determination to break the cycle of inequality. So it is an expectation. In terms of having a direct mandate, that is more complex. We don't maintain all schools in Ealing. Schools are governed through a variety of different ways. We find that as an Ealing Learning Partnership, our power is through what we might call lateral influence. So head teachers' influence on each other, schools' influence on each other. And what the Learning Partnership does is set up the architecture for all schools to be challenged by each other as part of our endeavour to ensure that we break this cycle over time. And it's through influence and really high quality training and through vocalising expectations that we think we're most likely to get that commitment.
Could I just also add on that one? It's really quite an interesting one, because I think we all know that unless something's measured, then action on it can be arbitrary. And I think really what I'm hearing from your question, Jamie, is how can we hold head teachers to account, and how can Ealing Learning Partnership actively hold head teachers to account for progress in this area? And I would think that's something we should be able to take away and explore further, because I'm pretty sure there must be something that we can do, because actually there is nobody that should be able to get a job as a head teacher within this borough that cannot show commitment to this area. And actually it should be a part of their aims, their objectives, their KPIs. And I'd go slightly further, Jamie. Not only should the borough hold that brief and hold head teachers firmly to account for that before they're even recruited, but Ofsted can play a key role in this, because actually if Ofsted made it mandatory for schools to engage in this activity, all of a sudden all schools would be doing it without question. It should be an Ofsted requirement, and so it should be driven by government from the highest level.
Thank you, everybody, for your contribution. I know there have been a lot of questions that have been coming in, but we need to move on to the next section. So I'm now going to bring this section to a close. If we have sufficient time at the end, we may come back to some of the questions. We are taking note of the questions, so we may reply to them and send out the information with the answers. But now we're going to move on to the next section. So Shamaka, can you please take over?
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to introduce the demands 4, 6, and 7. And these are, so demand 4 is make training for teachers on race equality and unconscious bias part of the core training. Demand 6 is every school should have a lead for race and diversity who is identifiable to parents. Demand 7 is increase the number of Black leaders in leading roles. And I think to give a perspective on this, Sarah Thompson, who is the school partnership lead, is going to give a response. And then there'll be a presentation from Monica McCarthy, head teacher at St. Vincent's Catholic School, primary school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we have the slides up, please? Next slide. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction. So these three demands have been put under the umbrella of how schools develop anti-racist practices. And I think picking up on what Rosalind said, we think at the heart of that, it's very much about the staff within schools. So that has been a very big focus for us during this first year of our programme. So looking at the first demand around making the training for teachers on race equality and unconscious bias part of the core training, as Rosalind's outlined, we've had a very comprehensive training programme that really at the heart of it has aimed to increase the racial literacy of all staff within schools, to fill knowledge gaps where they exist, particularly around the curriculum, and also to provide practical tools to help schools to facilitate change. And what you'll see on the slides there is we've listed 4 of the key programmes, and the challenging disproportionality and developing cultural competence is our core training, and our ambition is that every member of staff within all of our schools will have taken part in that training, and a core part of that training is examining and challenging our own biases and the impact that has in the classroom. So that's something that we're working on. We've had a series of race equality leadership seminars aimed at head teachers and the race and diversity leads within schools, and they have looked at areas of particular focus, things like developing your anti-racist action plan, your anti-racist policy, how you engage with parents as a school, and how to support people who are leading this work within school. As we've talked about already, and you've heard from Crystal around the curriculum training, which really is excellent, and for the staff that have gone on it, I think it is quite transformational in how they view what they're doing within schools. And we also have an audit tool, which sounds quite boring, but actually is a very useful way for schools to examine everything that they're doing to support their students. And it involves not only looking at data, but it also involves talking to students, talking to parents, talking to staff. So that's something that we've been promoting to schools as well. So in terms of the impact, you can see there that we've had over 1,000 staff from Ealing schools that have participated in one aspect at least of the race equality training programme this year. And that's either the programme that we have delivered centrally, and the challenging disproportionality training is actually a train the trainer model, so that's then rolled out within schools. So there's a number of schools that have rolled that out further, and then as Judy said, we've had a number of schools who have bought this training in directly and have had trained all of their school staff. So whilst 1,000 is a lot, it's nowhere near all of the staff in our schools. So I think taking both Rosalind's point and Julie's point, we have had what we would consider to be good engagement, and although these people have participated, some of them have been to all of the things we've offered. It's not just one thing that they've taken part in. However, we have much further to go if we're going to achieve our ambition of having this training for every member of staff within the school. And in terms of the impact, I think totally would agree with Rosalind about we need to get better at measuring this. We've got our KPIs we're reporting on, but we are starting to see evidence of impact. And I think there's 2 schools that we've got here today, they illustrate the impact that this type of training programme has within the work they're actually doing within school, whether it's adapting their curriculum, setting up. Monica's going to talk about the work she's been doing with parents later. We've got schools who are looking at their systems, they're using their data to see if there's evidence of bias. They're looking at how their behaviour policies are applied. They're looking at their school policies through an anti-racist lens. They're thinking about what books, what resources they use within their school, and how that reflects an aspirational positive view of the Black community. We've got examples of schools that have linked their appraisal targets to equalities and diversity. They've got staff working groups. We've got schools that are looking at the setting of their Black students, particularly in high school, and whether those students are in the right sets and they've been given the opportunity to achieve their full potential. And then we've got like the mentoring programs like the Insight to Uni that we've been promoting. And so there is a lot going on and there is a lot happening, but that's not to say that we're anywhere near achieving the overall demands of the tribunal. Next slide, please. So this demand around that every school should have a lead for race and diversity, absolutely, right from the conference that we had back in June, we have promoted this role. We know that in order for anything to change within schools, you need a senior person who's responsible for leading this work. And so we have promoted this to schools and encouraged them to have this person in post. And we centrally have provided them with support through the leadership seminar programs and through the other training to help them in their role, because it's not an easy role, and it requires skills at a very high level in terms of leading staff, training, reviewing policies, communicating importantly with parents, and that's definitely something that we want to support more on with next year. But we have got 70% of our schools have reported that they do now have a staff lead for race and diversity, which is excellent. We still obviously got 30% that haven't, so we need to focus on that. But next year we really will be focusing on how we support the people in these roles going forward. Next slide, please. The final demand, increasing the number of Black teachers in leadership roles. Currently, 76% of our leaders within school are white, as opposed to 70% of our pupil population who are from ethnic backgrounds that aren't white. We have only 5% of our leadership roles are Black people. And so that's definitely something that we want to change. We have the diversity and leadership training program that we've established for the first time this year, a year-long program, really offering extensive support over time, leadership coaching, training, mock recruitment experience, work shadowing, really trying to support people who want to access senior leadership to do so. However, we also recognise that it's not only about training people so that they can access jobs, it's about how inclusive are the schools in terms of making sure that their Black staff have opportunities in order to progress within the school. And so we are, from next year, we've got an inclusive recruitment and retention training that we will also be rolling out. We are promoting Ealing, so it's not only about developing our current staff, but it's also about how do we attract people to Ealing. We want to be recognised as a borough that values diversity, and we've got our Talking Heads promotional video that's just being finalised that really has current leaders from within our schools talking about their journey and why Ealing is a good place to work. And you can see in terms of the impact there, we've had 20 staff from our schools who've completed the diversity and leadership programme so far, 2 who've already secured more senior posts, which is brilliant. Next slide, please. So just the priorities for next year, rolling out the challenge and disproportionality training to as many schools as possible with our ambition that all staff are trained. We're expanding the race equality training programme. We're introducing new topics, such things like for schools around dealing effectively with racist incidents. We are developing the race and diversity leads network further. We've developed a bespoke training programme for governors because we're aware that this is an important area and picks up the point about holding head teachers to account. Our governors need to be fully on board with the race equality programme. We've got a new inclusive recruitment and retention training, and we will be rolling out the next diversity and leadership course. So now I think I'm going to hand over, actually. Now I've stopped talking to Monica.
Thanks, Sarah. I think lots has been said tonight about training, and it cannot be emphasized enough. Developing anti-racist practices in school has got to start with training, and it can be very tokenistic. I did the training myself over 2 years ago, just on by myself, and the more I heard from Crystal, from Orleen, and from other speakers around unconscious bias, about Black history, I was actually dumbfounded with the things that I didn't know. I simply didn't know, and I actually kept running up and down to some of our Black staff members, and I said, this can't be right. Surely, and she said, Monica, it's right. Went through the program, and I thought, you know, I can't pass this on adequately to our staff. I just don't have those skills. And so we insisted that our whole staff were trained, and it took a long time. It took at least 7 lots of staff meetings, nearly an entire term really, of afternoons, again going through that with qualified speakers on the subject. And when I heard back from our staff about they felt embarrassed, they felt humbled, and all the things that I'd felt when I did that training, we realized that we couldn't possibly develop practices without doing a huge amount of research on developing anti-racist practices and on racial equality. And it was an absolute wide, eye-opener for all of us to do that. We did a lot of research, a lot of reading, books like Black and British, White Fragility was another eye-opener, why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. And some of our Black staff said, oh, here we go again. It's just coming up again. And I said, no, we are making a commitment and we're going to make this work. Like Jamie, we've developed, we are still developing because it's not an easy thing to do. The curriculum with every topic that we do, we look at Black history, about racial equality, and most importantly, that every single one of our children can see themselves in our curriculum. Not only about curriculum, and it's not, so it starts with the training, but also about behavior and racist incidents in schools. It's really pricked our ears up to use those as training points. When racist incidents do occur in the school, we don't just note it down and move on and yes, treat it like any other behavior. Our ears are really pricked up to it and where it's come from and why children, why this happens. And we use restorative processes to make sure we get those incidents of racism addressed. And we speak to parents very much around that. And I'll talk about that later on, about parental engagement. We need to be disruptors and we need to be activists for change. And that includes our pupils. We're, with all due respect, people sitting around this table, we have to have succession planning. We're not going to be here in education. We have got to build our pupils up to be those disruptors of the future. And our pupil voice is something that we strongly, strongly believe in our school. Our pupils have a voice. It is their school, it is their education. And of course, we're there to facilitate that for them. But we do need to influence. And I think in response to Jamie's and Stephanie, to you as well, about what influence, how do we make these head teachers? How do we get that, the importance over to them? And the video I'll show you in a minute is one of our pupils, age 10, year 5 last year, and we took her to Parliament. We took her to select committee room. It was part of a process of speaking out about the leaders that we need. And she stood up in Parliament. Now, she's very quiet, not very confident, a Black Caribbean girl, but she wanted her voice to be heard. And we did a lot of work around with her and with other pupils. And we need our pupils to influence. They need to influence Ofsted. They need to influence the Department for Education and influence the leaders of our country. So I'll stop there just that you can see just a very, very short clip of Nia in Parliament, where previous to that, we'd kicked some of the Labour Party out of a select committee room and said, we've booked this committee room. You need to listen to our voice. There were 4 MPs there listening to Nia speak.
My name is Nia, and I'm 10 years old. I attend St. Vincent's Primary School in Ealing, West London. I'm really grateful to be here today to share with you all my opinions about the leaders we want to see out in society. The leaders we want to see out in society should reflect the society we want to have today. Here, I hold a copy of our national curriculum. My school has tried really hard to include me in its curriculum, but I do not see myself in it. Focusing on inequalities of the past, do not challenge ideas of equality between groups.
And our national curriculum has to change. And we've got to have pupils like Nia holding that and shaking that up and saying, we need something done about this.
Thank you so much. We're now going to take some questions. I'm thinking that if we have like 5 questions, 3 minutes, we're just a little bit over our time now, but let's take some questions, please.
This question is from Paris. Is there an opportunity for schools in Ealing to engage more closely and make partnerships with the Race Commission to ensure they are meeting these 7 agendas demands? My school, Dormers Wells, have been reviewing our curriculum for the past few years after the ascent of the new curriculum. This has now been extended through all phases. How can we as schools help you to support us? Let's take that.
I think that's a very good question. I think what I would say is that the Citizens Tribunal members are open to engaging with schools. Though what we would say is that you do go through the Ealing Learning Partnership. I think it would be useful to have them in the loop. But if you wanted any member of the Citizens Tribunal to engage and support the school in putting together their curriculum and looking at ways in which they can really develop anti-racist practices, then I think we'd be more than open to that.
And just to follow on from that, I think Dormers Wells is a school that Crystal has worked with. And I think picking up the earlier point about we need to be better at sharing examples of good practice, I think it's schools like Dormers that where we know they've done a lot of work, that we need to bring them in and share what they've been doing more widely. So I think that's definitely the way that we can work with the school going forward.
Questions from Faraya. What are some examples of effective parental involvement that you have? I haven't covered this one before. Yeah, we come back. Okay, sorry. Yeah, this one's from Ade. I'm just thinking of, I wonder if actually these are old questions. How many schools have designated race and diversity staff lead and governing board champions? Yeah, okay. Are we getting through this quicker? Question from Laurie regarding E&D roles. What are the ethnicities of those leads?
It varies. It varies completely by school. I think sometimes people ask whether it's better for the lead to be from a certain background, but I think we would say it's most important is that they're at a leadership level so that they can lead that change within the school. And there is also it shouldn't always be left to the Black staff to lead this work. And I think that we strongly believe that. And as Monica's explained, it's important for all staff within schools to understand these challenges. And so, yeah, so it is a mix currently.
I'll take this is a question for Monica or for you. What was the personal impact on your white teachers? I found that it's easy to say the words nigh on impossible to really feel the impact of racism. How have your staff changed on a personal level?
They really have, and we continue to do that because I said, even with every racist incident, not that we have many of them, but when we do, and we use it as training points. So they've, as I said, they have their ears pricked up to this all the time because they have been so shocked, I say, and embarrassed from the training that they've done, things that our white teaching staff just had no idea about before.
And I've lost count of how many questions.
Can I just jump in just really quickly to kind of add to that? The training that we had, there was a bit about microaggressions and the pinpricks of microaggressions. And when we reflected on it as a staff, it's anyone who's had an experience of being othered. So anyone who's faced sexism or homophobia or anything like that can relate to being othered, not being seen in the curriculum, and to have unfair character traits, put on them just as a basis of their gender or their sexuality or something like that. So we, the white staff in our school, although we don't have the personal experience of racism, we could relate to another experience of being othered and having microaggressions, kind of playing out for us. And I think that gave some people some kind of understanding of how it could be, even though they don't have the personal experience. And that training was well, that's why we're saying that training is so vital, because you come into it thinking, well, I'm not racist, I'm a teacher, I love everyone. And then you start the training, you think, oh, I am actually racist, and jumping from that to realize that actually the world that I grew up in, the curriculum that I had when I was at school has made me unintentionally racist, and I need to fight against that. And it's making that understanding as a teacher that you can actually be racist without even realizing it, rather than saying I don't see color and all that kind of stuff. So that's where the importance of the training is, in getting the white stuff on board.
Can I really quick? Very, very brief. Sorry. I just wanted to say, from talking to staff who I have worked with at the school, the fundamental cultural change that many of them feel and vocalize is that they are speaking about race for the first time. So that in itself, in terms of the personal development, I know the question was about the personal development of the staff involved in the training, it really comes through in the fact that they are speaking about it. So race is no longer a taboo. And for the first time, they're able to have honest conversations, and that must be progressive.
It's a question from Ade Banjoko. Have Black staff said they want more training? How many schools have embedded systems for capturing the voices of Black staff?
We haven't had specific requests from Black staff for more training. But I think when we had we did the school survey, that was definitely an area for development in terms of listening to the voices of staff. That was I can't remember the exact percentages, but that was all of the listen to the voices of pupils, where the percentage was higher, but parents and staff. So that is definitely an area for us to focus on more going forward as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think yeah. Okay, so actually no, we've got 1 more minute. Yeah, let's take one more question.
This is a question from Shahala. Again, forgive me if I've not pronounced your name correctly. It says, my daughter is the only Afro-Caribbean girl in her class. I asked her to be moved to another more diverse class, and the response was, we can't because of numbers. She has already spoken about feeling odd and different. How do I challenge this without getting the response that I should look at moving her to a different school? And somebody else in the chat, I think it was a lady called Bernice Miles, said she was struck and distressed by Shahala's experience of her daughter in the school. Could this please be answered? Hence.
I think if this was a request to me, again, with the knowledge that we now have, the research we've had, is that be a really honest conversation with that parent, and why a school wouldn't, talk around that request and try to fulfill that. I think there's more to that, perhaps around. I mean, I don't know, because I obviously don't know the school. That would be a very, very important conversation I'd like to have. And potentially move that child if they felt uncomfortable. No child wants to feel uncomfortable.
Can I just say on that one as well? It also shows the lack of knowledge and awareness of the teaching staff not to take the concerns of the parents seriously. That is already showing their lack of knowledge and how much that school needs that training. Because how is it they've not considered the feelings of one child who is a different race to all our other staff? That in itself is quite concerning on behalf of the school. And I would encourage the parents to engage with the school, and if they don't take you seriously, keep engaging or get an advocate to go along and have that conversation with them, because your child's well-being and self-esteem is paramount.
Thank you. Yep, I agree with that. Okay, I'm going to bring this section to a close, and we're now going to move on to section 3. And Rosita, or area 3, Rosita, can I hand over to you, please?
Thanks very much, Denise. This section is about empowering parents to play an active role in their children's education. And obviously this is a really important issue because we've had questions about it already, so which we will deal with. The empowerment of parents and the involvement of parents is such an integral part of children's progress that it is something, in a sense, this should have been higher up the agenda, because we are hearing from the questions, the concerns that parents are having about their lack of involvement or not being listened to. Therefore, for this section, I'd like to introduce you, I would have liked to introduce you to Orleen Badu, who was going to start by talking about that. But in fact, Orleen can't be with us. And so I'm going to ask Sarah if she can deal with it. And then Monica is also going to talk about experiences in her own school.
Oh, thank you, Rosita. Yes, I'm sorry that Orleen isn't here. It's due to technical problems. Orleen Badu is somebody that we've employed through ELP. She's a very experienced, she's an ex-head teacher. who previously worked in Hackney, and she is a racial literacy expert and advocate and works across a lot of London boroughs. So we're really fortunate to have her working with us in Ealing, and she leads a lot of our training. She also is the chair of our new Race Equality in Education Parent Representative Forum that we set up, that has been meeting since, I think our first meeting was October. And this is the first time that we, within Ealing, that we have had this high level group that is made up of Julie and myself and other senior officers within ELP, but crucially with representatives from our community partners, and with the focus of us having this formal mechanism where we can bring in the voices of parents through the organisations that work with them to really advocate on parents' behalf, and really, and I mean, there's something that Orlean says quite a lot is that we should be listening to understand, and that is very much what we're aiming to do with the forum, to understand, to inform all the plans, all the things that we're doing, but really trying to put parents at the heart of that. And it's not always easy, and it's a new way of working for us, but we are really committed to making that work and taking it forward. So that at a strategic level, that is a way that we are trying to empower parents so that they can play that active role in their children's education. In terms of looking at the work of individual schools, so through the training and the seminars that we have delivered, we have had this focus on engaging and having positive relationships with parents, and which is absolutely essential for all the reasons that we've talked about here. And we've brought people in from other boroughs who've talked about their experiences, and we've had local community organisations like Park who took part and gave sort of a history of the parent struggles with education. You know, we've been heard within education over the decades. So we've really tried to bring those voices into, so that senior leaders within schools are hearing those. And we've really focused on encouraging schools to set up parent forums, particularly parent forums for Black parents. This is still in its early days. We've got some brilliant examples, but it is a small number of schools, and it is a priority for us going forward. You can see the impact data there. That's from the Race Equality in Schools survey. And you can see that 60% of schools reported that they'd engage parents with discussions around their curriculum, and that 24% were working on plans to engage parents around their curriculum. But only 23% of schools have really captured parents' views around equalities, although 44% are working on their plans for that. And only 18% of schools have currently specifically consulted with their Black heritage parents during this year, but 28% are developing their plans to. I think this is absolutely an area, it's an area that schools have asked for support with. It's something that we are working on. Next year, we've commissioned one of our schools who've been doing this work well, and who have a member of staff who also has a dual role within a community organisation, who will be there to work with individual schools to take this forward. So I hope by the time we're here next year, we'll have a much stronger picture in terms of being able to say that we have more schools that have Black parent forums, and that they are being able to influence what is happening within their schools. Next slide, please. So the priorities for next year: increasing the number of schools that have Black parent forums, really raising the awareness of the Race Equality Commission demands, and the ELP and the school commitments with parents. It's something that's come up at the parent forum, and I know some of the community organisations are very keen for parents to be able to hold schools to account. And it's only by knowing that there is this Race Equality Commission, that there are these priorities, that schools, that parents will feel empowered to actually ask their schools, what are you doing to meet this agenda? So we do know we need to do more around that. And we want to continue to develop our relationship with the Parent Representative Forum to make sure that parents' voices are really at the heart of what we're doing. And we would need to work with them. We've had discussions about this already around what sort of consultation mechanisms we can develop, so that we know whether we're making progress from a parent's perspective. And I think until, as somebody, one of the community leaders said, it's if you're a parent in a school and you don't see any change, you don't care about all of this that's happening. You need to see that change within your school. And I think that was very important message for us to hear. So we are aware that this is an area that we need to focus on next year. And now I'm going to hand over to Monica because she's doing some work in this area. So she's going to share examples of that.
Parents are the first educators of their children. And so just that question that came through, a moment ago, schools aren't listening to parents and we're not approachable. It doesn't work. It just simply doesn't work. And we have to work really, really closely. As I always say to our parents, you know things about your children that we don't know. And we know things about your children that you don't know. We need to work together for the whole child. I just want to play a video in a minute before I talk around some of the things that we've been doing with parents. It's called Colour the World Day. This is an initiative that came up from some of our Year 6 children. Celebrating diversity in our school is huge. It's at the absolute core of what we do. And this is a culmination of the children's efforts. So I just want to play a little bit of fun that we had, and it's entitled Race Equality, Our Journey So Far. Just have a watch the video.
Give me freedom, give me fire, give me reason, take me higher. Be the champion, you take the field down. You can.
It was a day of much celebration, but I wanted to play that fast because any school can do that. It's an easy thing to do. Get parents in, have lots of food, celebrate, children dress up in cultural clothes. But that's just in the midst of lots of things that we do. Prior to this, we invited, and it wasn't just an email that went out saying, please come in and talk to us. It was a personal invitation to our Black Caribbean parents. We approached them individually and said, we really need to talk to you because we need your help. I'm white, I can't do this. We've got 2 leaders, race equality leaders in our school. One is our deputy head teacher, and he is white, and one of our Black teachers. And this is a mixture. It's really important to get those voices. And these are parents who never come into our school. And this group, and we sat around the table and we spoke to them about what we were about to embark on and all the training that we'd done and how important it was to us to change practice and to become anti-racist, to really become anti-racist. And it was hugely powerful conversations we had around that table that morning with parents and grandparents there. And basically the bottom line is we just want people to be honest. We want to be honest about the inequalities of the past. We want to be honest about the inequalities that are still happening. And let's change this together. And so we've listened a lot to them. Post that celebration as well, we invited Crystal to come and speak to our parents. We didn't get a huge amount, but we got enough to start a conversation. And I think Crystal and I were really quite really pleased because what came out of some of our, we got into a conversation around childbirth actually, and about pain thresholds, and how a lot of our Black parents there were saying people perceive Black people to have high pain thresholds in childbirth. And some of our white parents said, no, that can't be true. All the things that I'd said, that can't possibly be true. And we had these really honest conversations. And post that meeting with Crystal, I sent out a survey and I wanted to know from parents, why they weren't there, if they hadn't attended, why they weren't there, what we could do about that, and any other questions they had. And even from the response to that, I still got a couple saying, why is it all about Black history? Why is it about Black? Why is it about Black people? So I know I've got a huge amount of work to do still. And so we've got plans for the autumn term to do some more work on unconscious bias. We've got a lot of refugees in our school, people, of course, who have been discriminated against, and we get that. But what we need to understand is about race and anti-racism as something in itself, and about skin color. So we've made great strides with our parents, and also what we've been able to do is really concentrate on our communication with them. Our social media posts are very explicit. we don't hide. As I said earlier on, we are disruptors and we want change. If we want change, we've got to be honest, and we get it out in any way we possibly can. If we want to attract parents, they're going to see they love our Facebook, Instagram, our Twitter posts, and we get everything we can out through there. But the best way to approach that is to approach individually. So I haven't seen you for a while. Why you didn't come to that? And I've been amazed by the parents that we invited, that we personally invited to the meeting, and the parents that were involved in that wonderful Colour the World Day now come up in the morning to give me a hug and say, how are you doing? And they know I know them, they know I know their child. And it's been very, very powerful, but we are just so at the beginning of that journey.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, lots of very powerful things sound like they're happening. That's really, really good. We will take some questions, please.
Sure, we've got less this time, but there's a question from Laurie, and actually it chimes to what Monica's just said. Quite insightful. She said, in terms of setting up Black Parents Forums, how are you preparing for the backlash from staff and parents? Because there will be one. You've just...
Yeah, there will, like in the surveys that, that came back to me. Parents don't understand, our white parents, whether it doesn't matter where they come from, what walk of life, or how they've been discriminated against, they still don't understand. And it's our job to educate them. And yeah, if we're going to be disruptive and we're going to change things, we've got to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared for that backlash. I wouldn't call it backlash. I call it dialogue. I call it really positive dialogue. And we've got those relationships with our parents. It shouldn't be a backlash. It should be a dialogue between us and some really honest conversations. And we have to change bit by bit. We can't change. It's not going to just happen overnight. But we keep going and we keep going and we keep going until that succession planning comes through us and onto the next generation.
Can I just say as well, I think the resistance that you will get from some teachers, again, we have to remember that these are the very same teachers that we're hoping to teach our children. So the resistance that we are getting from there does need to be addressed and it does need to be tackled. And I think that question was right in that I think in many schools there is a backlash. I've experienced it in my own school. Actually, when I took over as chair of governors, all the governors actually resigned. So we know that sometimes when we step into these places that these things happen, but I think it's important for us to move forward and we don't allow them to hold us back.
Question from Anonymous. How can parents join the forum? That's the parents forum we talked about.
Well, the forum that we've got is not an open forum for parents to join because it's representatives of key organisations. There is the Black Caribbean Parents Forum that was set up at the beginning when the project Jamie refers to, the No Learner Left Behind project, which happened a couple of years ago. As part of that, we worked to set up the Black Caribbean Parents Forum, so parents can join that organisation, and if you just search online, you'll find them. But they can't join the one we've talked about. What we're hoping is that every school will have a forum, so they should be able to engage with it through their child's school.
I would just like to add to that and say that, as a parent, you have the right to go into your child's school and say, and ask them, how are you engaging in this important agenda? Majority of schools, I would say all schools, should be delighted to share with you the work that they're doing, the progress that they're making. And certainly we've been highlighting to schools that the importance of communicating to parents the journey that the school is on to becoming anti-racist and how parents can be involved. So please don't worry about it. Go and speak to the school and ask the question.
Hi, this is Shabake. I think this is an area that's quite important. So I'm here. Also, I'm part of an organization that actually does a lot of firefighting with schools, and we engage with a lot of parents. And what we find is that a lot of parents don't really understand how the school system works. We have a lot of parents whose English is not their first language. We have a lot of parents who feel disempowered because they come sometimes from countries where they're not maybe provided a kind of, maybe it's kind of authoritative. And I think what you said is quite important, Councillor, but it's not as easy as that because we've had cases where there's been a clash between parents and schools. We have cases I think about 7 years ago, where some parents actually from a certain ethnic community, did some kind of demonstration outside of a school. And I think when I attended the kind of parenting group, Sarah was explaining, one thing I realized in that meeting is that I think there's an effort to maybe cascade some of those discussions and see how schools can implement. And I'm not kind of promoting an organization, but I've got an organization called Parents Actions and Resource Center. I've been to 2 of the events. They're quite amazing. So they work with a lot of Black Caribbean kids and their parents, and they're constantly engaging schools around schools exclusions. And they have a very good program. So I think sometimes when we talk about good examples, we need to look at what's happening within the borough and actually taking. So they've sent me actually something that's quite interesting. It's about, questioning schools about what are they really doing in terms of engaging parents. And also one thing we have to understand is that this should be that kind of co-produced process. It has to be something, not just because schools have to set up forums. It has to be, as you mentioned, learning points. So what are the schools, what have they learned from maybe some of the complaints from the parents, and how can they use that to come up with systems? And a simple example will be doing morning coffee mornings, and just talking about how the education system works. Because as a parent, my kids are grown now. I came to find about earlier framework when I challenged my school, because my daughter kept coming home with drawings, and I was saying, where's the learning? And I saw there's something called the early childhood framework. So these things are not explained. And that's why sometimes you find that, there's that kind of distrust between the parents and the schools. It's just my comment.
Thank you, Shamak. You actually hit it on the nail, but you've taken my thunder away, because I had written down that, what about the parents don't speak English as the first language? They don't understand the process. They have no idea we have these kind of policies in place because nobody would tell them about it. That is the language barrier. I'm a governor at Featherstone Primary School. I would say over 90% of the students in that school are from ethnic backgrounds. And I feel sometimes that it's about addressing those issues again and again, and reminding through the governing body that we have parent population who don't speak English as the first language. But in Featherstone Primary School, we're doing exactly what you've pointed out: coffee mornings, the head teacher greeting the parents, talking to them, and maybe having their child there just to do a bit of translating so the parents understand what the head teacher is trying to, the message that's being relayed. But a lot more work needs to be put behind for the parents who don't speak English, who can then be able to understand the process, understand the policies, and support their child and support the school. Thank you for raising that. I think it's a very important point.
So this is more of a statement. It's a success example story. So it's in Faray again. My daughter, who is of Black African heritage, encountered discouragement when she expressed her aspirations to apply for university. On multiple occasions, she was told by her white teachers that university was unobtainable for her. This caused confusion for her, as we had to repeatedly correct this misconception at home. Furthermore, alternative paths to university were disproportionately emphasized for Black students, including many of her friends. However, despite these challenges, she and her Black friends have thrived in university. We are fortunate to address the misguided expectations of certain uninformed white teachers early on, and reinforced in our daughter that achieving a university education was not only possible, but within her reach if she desired it. Thank you for acknowledging that this is a manifestation of a form of racism. Could this example be used as part of the unconscious bias? And that's from Faray. Yeah. This question is from Kifle Beraki. How can we include race and cultural knowledge into the classroom curriculum projects?
So speaking as a head teacher of a primary school, it's through the training that we've had. So we have training on decolonizing the curriculum from Crystal, which brings really good examples of what schools might be doing wrong, how they need to change their approach. And it really is a whole school effort. So it's curriculum leaders of all the different, so schools have a curriculum leader for history, one for geography, one for English. All of those leaders need to examine what we're doing. And in English, are all our texts from, you know, white British or American authors? You know, do we have stories written about Black people, but actually written by a white author, so it's not an authentic experience? You know, do we need to change all of that? Are we putting in tokenistic things? Are we talking about a deficit model when we talk about slavery, rather than actually talking about all the positive contributions migration has made to the world, you know, whilst acknowledging the difficulties? And there's so much to it that it's like was said earlier on by Monica, it's not anything that you can ever say is done. You can't just say, oh, we're doing it this year and we're finished. There's always something new, and there's always reflections on your curriculum. And that's where parents have a vital part of actually saying, okay, you've been studying this, but actually it would be better to study this because there's this part of, you know, of culture you've missed out. And we don't know what we don't know. So that's where it's really important that schools are open to listening to parents and understanding where we're making mistakes and admitting that we will make mistakes. And this is an ongoing process, but it is led by the curriculum leaders in schools who set the curriculum within the bounds that we have to teach the national curriculum as well. And that's what we were saying about that needs to change because it's so full of European history. It's really, really hard to put Black contributions in the time that we've got.
I think that's right, Jamie. And also, I mean, I think if we just ask ourselves the one question whenever we're planning for curriculum, can every single child in my classroom see themselves as a hero in my curriculum? In our curriculum, they've got to see themselves. If they're projecting white people all the time, how can our Black children possibly see themselves as heroes or have aspirations? And that's our job with every single thing that we teach them.
Thanks. I've been working with schools to help them with the adaptations to the curriculum so that we can include Black contributions within the curriculum. And the way we do it through the training is to have sort of like an aspirational approach model. And that aspirational approach model helps schools to look at what they're already doing, but also to understand the intentionality and the impact on the students as to the type of history they're including and their approach to that history. For example, you mentioned about the deficit approach to transatlantic enslavement. That, for example, is one particular area that has been approached in a way that has been insensitive, should I say. It hasn't really acknowledged humanity in the way it should do. And you could draw parallels with other sort of atrocities that are actually done in a more sensitive way, which is actually quite heartbreaking to see, but also we have to see it, we have to reveal it so that we can move forward, but also to make sure that every time we encounter Black people within the curriculum, it is not only in terms of them having suffered racism, suffered oppression. Yes, it's important to teach those things, but it's also very important that we understand African civilizations existed. We are debunking the idea that white people came to Africa to civilize them and so on. So all of these things are very, very important, and all of those things are in the training, and they are opening eyes. And I've seen some fantastic work in schools, but I'll leave it there. I could go on.
So I didn't intend to say, I think I just go fired up. So I just use an example with myself. So I was born and raised in Kenya and a British colony. So when my kids were going through education here, I had to actually use my knowledge. For example, Petition of Africa, how Africa was carved up during, with different European countries, and this wasn't taught in schools. For example, something controversial maybe about Churchill, that, wasn't taught. So I think from the discussion, I think, and something maybe I had in my mind is we also have to think about how do we cascade this kind of training to parents? I think it shouldn't just be for the teachers. So we should find a way to cascade some of this, training to parents. And it could be movie mornings again, because I think it's important for parents to also build their knowledge around race and such things.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Janice, just one quick point. And I know we've talked a lot this evening about parental engagement, but I think it's also important to remember that while you're struggling to get parents, there are reasons behind that. And I think it's important to unpick that, because actually a lot of these parents, they're tired. They're tired of going around the loop and around the circle. They're tired of having conversations about anti-racism and improvements and making things better when actually they don't see anything changing. So I think it's that impact that we've talked about and I've seen in the presentations today that is going to make the real difference. And that is what we've got to monitor, because that is how you're going to build parental engagement when they actually see something is actually changing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, it's been a very good session, but before we finish, so I'm going to bring that section now to a close. That section is now closed. And I'd like to introduce Councillor Jasbir Anand to say a few words, please.
It'd be more than a few words, Dennis. But, it's been absolutely fantastic listening to the tribunal with the issues and what they've been doing since October, and our professionals then responding back to those concerns and the issues that have been raising, and the audience who have really put in some really interesting questions to really put us on the mark to say, well, what the hell are you doing about this? And that is important. I want to thank you all for really contributing today, because it's been an eye-opener for me, listening to some of the issues that are coming out of inequalities, and then listening to our professionals who address those issues and are really trying to drive them forward. And it's not always easy to make that change, but we are here to make that change. And, it's so pleasing to hear how those recommendations from the commissioning report for education has been built into a 4-year education race equality partnership plan. And you know what, we really are committed towards this plan, and we're committed to making those cultural changes, and we're committed to changing attitudes. And that's been really addressed by the professional team today. But a lot of work still needs to happen. And this is where I think the partnership work with the tribunal will help us as a local authority to progress further and be able to really be transparent, listen to our parents, listen to the pupils, and there's governors, of course, on the governing bodies who should also be looking at these issues and working in their schools to make sure that we are really delivering on our equalities agenda. And I really hope that the audience today found both the feedback from our education colleagues, schools and partners encouraging in terms of the actions and plans that are being put into place. But I think we've all agreed that we cannot carry on as usual. Status quo is not an option, and we want to make those changes. Lots more work needs to be addressed, and I'm sure that's acknowledged by both sides. So great to hear from the tribunal. Absolutely fantastic work that's gone on since October, because I've only taken over the portfolio, I think in May. But looking at the strands of work and about the work, and then the scrutinizing, and then holding to account our education colleagues who are fantastic in their responses, but for the actions, this is where I think your work is going to bring a lot of light to the end of the tunnel. Might not be a complete end of the tunnel, but it is a progression, and where we will definitely work to deliver on. So the Commission's report in January 22 revealed some very glaring and stark inequalities, and we saw the numbers of schools exclusion and attainment for Black Caribbean boys pretty shocking. And I think that was addressed in the presentation as well. But we also heard of the ambitions of many schools who are prepared to really put in the work to turn these glaring inequalities around the council. And we really want to deliver on those actions. But we can't just deliver those actions on our own. We need to work with yourselves to make sure that we can deliver on all the actions. But we'll continue to work closely with the other local partners wherever we can. But however, we must also take responsibility of our actions, and the council will not defend a lack of action where more is needed. So our young people deserve to be given the chance to be the best they can be. The education they receive and the schools they attend should be preparing them for the bright future, not setting up to fail. We mustn't let the system fail our children. Training programs for school staff and governors as well, it's very important, but we also need to celebrate the achievements where we can, and just not knock them back and say, we're not going to celebrate them, or it wasn't good enough. Let's also celebrate those achievements. It's a long journey, a journey where we will find quick goals, a journey where it's going to take time for us to make that difference. But do celebrate those goals that we do achieve as we go along. And that's the partnership work I would be looking at from the tribunal with the local authority and the cabinet members, which are here. And we're from the Black backgrounds ourselves. So who would understand more about the racist issues or even the lack and the gaps that we really need to deliver on? And we recognize the actions, and we will not achieve the results, but actions accompanied by deep cultural change will be required, and we need to tackle those embedded inequalities, which will take time, as I say again and again, but we will deliver on them. But at the same time, we cannot be complacent or decide that actions are too hard. This agenda is too important for us to slip on. And I think that the Children's Services team understand that. We cannot slip on that. And I also believe that, as my colleague here, the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, understands that we need to really deliver on this very important agenda. And we must be on top of it. I think parents who do not speak, that's my thunder, but parents that do not speak English as the first language not need to be sidelined. They need to be part of this journey. They need to be part of the program. They actually need to understand what their child goes through. Are there policies in place? Is help available? As one of the parents pointed out, their child is the only Black Caribbean in the class, but she feels disproportionate, but what help is available? Now, that parent speaks English and can write the question. What about the parent that doesn't speak English and will not be able to communicate? How is he or she going to be able to tell the school, well, my child is the only Black child in a white school, so how do I address that? I think it is important for us to help those parents who need that help. Ealing partnership strapline is no learner left behind. This quite rightly articulates a mission to challenge the entrenched partners described, but there needs to be greater urgency in schools. A very collective response needs to be there for us all. But I value the work that the tribunal have done, and I value the work that the local authority leaders do as well. And I think there is hope. There is going to be issues we will agree and disagree on, but I think it's important for us to really narrow the gap on inequalities. I want to thank you all once again for all your efforts. A special thank you to the panel for your time and your evidence-based reports, which are going to help us to narrow the gap. Once again, thank you to everyone in this room and our audience for being part of this journey.
Thank you. You've stole my thunder now as well. That's okay. But yeah, I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone, especially the audience, for sending your questions in, and we will read through them all and we will try to find a way that we can answer questions that have been posed in the chat. I'd like to thank my fellow Citizen Tribunal members for all the hard work that they have done and the time that they've spent on this priority. So thank you. I'd like to also then thank Julie Lewis, Sarah Thompson, Councillor, sorry, Councillor Nagpal, Councillor Anand, Monica from, I won't say the schools, but, and Jamie, and then Crystal as well. Thank you so much for attending, and thanks Orleen as well for putting her contribution. And I will now close this meeting and call it to an end. Oh, yes, sorry. So we haven't now confirmed our future dates for the next priorities, but there are housing, policing, income and employment, participation, democracy, and I've said them not in the order they're on there, but they're the next ones, and we will let you know the dates. So please watch this space. And I now bring this meeting to a close.
Chair on the
Thank you.
policing, you'll see me again.
Lovely. Thank you.